Who is the one player you need to get from a team that just lost its quarterback? That and more this week on the couch. Dwain McFarland, welcome to the couch. Blood is in the streets at quarterback. Everybody's running for cover, but there's a reason to go in and get somebody from an offense that just lost their quarterback. Who is it?
Yeah, I think when you look at the whole situation, Sig, I don't see how anybody's really going to come down enough on the price of like CMC, Kamara, maybe even a Michael Thomas, which leaves me really at the player that also I think is going to have a bit of an injury discount. And for me, I think there's other reasons why, which is it's James Conner. For me, when I think about the Steelers and I think about what they're going to have to do now, I don't see this being a 65-35, pass to run split team anymore. I think they're going to have to run the ball more. We know they have a really good offensive line. We know that Tomlin loves to lean on one running back. Even, if you look at Connor, these last few weeks has still been up around like the 70% of the team attempts. And I think we're going to see more rushing. Do I think the offense is going to be in the red zone as often and do some of the things they could have done with Ben? No, but I wasn't super impressed with what we were seeing from Roethlisberger in this spread out offense without Antonio Brown. So for me, I think the guy that's going to be at the biggest discount right now because of his injury and because of what's going on at the quarterback that I think is still in line for, big attempts. Now we do have to watch his practice reports this week. Yeah. But I think Connor's the guy that you're most likely to be able to go get at a decent discount.
This is good for me because as a Steelers fan, I'm in a dark place. And we're going to use this as just a jumping off point, Dwayne, because I'm in a dark place because winter's here. But at the same time, I'm not going to say this is going to be a net positive, but it could be something around a net push because they have a good offensive line. And I get the impression that Ben Roethlisberger has been the offensive coordinator. Now you can let Randy Fichtner, what's like 35% play action or something like that. Like play action all of a sudden is part of the offense. The coach using alignments and personnel sets and movement to put the defense at a disadvantage and trying to take advantage of that thing that the play creates. We can do that again. Todd Haley had Roethlisberger doing some of this, and then eventually they had a falling out. So it could be okay. And plus Dante Moncrief will be off the field. That's a big gain. Like you said, watching the injury report. But I like that one. And the thing is, the players you mentioned, I know Kamara and CMC were top 3 picks. Michael Thomas was going about the same part of the draft as Connor, but you can probably get Connor a lot cheaper now than you can get Thomas. I like that. So, I gave my little mini take, and I like your mini take too. And another thing I got to, and Dwayne, you're part of the RSP family, so you're sober. You're not going to be wild-eyed like me, but you have to say, what is it going to look like? We know it's not going to look like what it was before. It's going to look like something. What is it going to look like when we're projecting these offenses with new quarterbacks? So some of these might not even be worth spending a lot of time on, Dwayne, but let's just touch on them, all right? Let's start with one that no timeline for Cam Newton's foot, and who knows about his psyche. Kyle Allen, another air raid quarterback, and Will Grier, another air raid quarterback, right there in the background. And again, it almost makes us question the validity of what we've seen from Carolina's offense, at least against Tampa. It looks like Tampa's defense is good, which then makes their offense boring, which is something we may grapple with later. But it also could be that Cam Newton just isn't playing well. And hey, Kyle Allen, you never know. But even this week, because it's Arizona, man, Kyle Allen beat out Kyler Murray to start at Texas A&M. Now they're facing each other. So you got to make decisions about Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore and Greg Olsen this week. And then you have to think about their values going forward. What do you think, Dwayne?
Yeah, ultimately, I think this, in one way, it hurts. And here's why, Sig. When you look at the design of the Carolina Panthers offense, part of it is built around the threat of Cam Newton as a runner, right? So the other team has to always think about that aspect of Cam's game, and that opens up other things. Now, from a potential positive, spin, for the offense is to your point, Cam just isn't right. So it's good to see that they're just going to go ahead and rest him, whether it's his shoulder or if it's just I know they're saying that his foot is where the setback has come, but Dr. Gene talks about compensatory and all these different things that can occur. So I think it's good that we're going to see Cam, get rest, because hopefully that eventually equals, the Panthers, offense, getting back on track later this season. But for now, if you watched the Tampa Bay game last week, on Thursday night, Cam looked terrible. Curtis Samuel probably could have had 150 to 200 yards.
Thank you.
In that game. And so to me, bringing in a quarterback that can at least, have some sort of timing, hopefully have some better accuracy. Now, I mean, who knows if Allen's going to be able to succeed or not, but for right now, I think this is the right move for this particular team. And if I can avoid having Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore and those types in my lineup, or even Greg Olsen, obviously no way you're going to bench CMC. He's in your lineup no matter what kind of league you're in. If I can avoid starting those players this week, because I've really got other options on my team, I'm going to do it. But I'm not going to be totally petrified if I've got to put a Curtis Samuel into my lineup. He's still going to be part of the game plan. I expect he and Moore and Olsen to still get similar targets. They may run the ball a little bit more, and I expect it to be a little tougher, on a quarterback that can't run, but at the same time, I'm not going to be totally petrified of that. If I can avoid it, I will, but I'm still willing to dip my toe in that water, especially we're not really talking DFS here, but if we were,
Arizona.
I think, against Arizona, absolutely. I mean, Curtis Samuel, I already built a few lineups. I'm just going to go ahead and say I do have Curtis Samuel in there.
It's never too early to build lineups. I mean,
that's my problem is I start building them on Tuesday, Sig.
Oh, well, and the worst is when you start looking ahead at the schedule, and you can start thinking about week 4. Because I start looking at the week 4 schedule this morning, actually. Okay. And look, the fascinating thing here is that we all heard going into the draft that they were looking for a quarterback. They didn't get a quarterback that was anything like Cam in the draft when they took Will Grier. And some people, Matt Waldman included, liked Grier. So it's fascinating if they have different offensive designs. But it wouldn't be surprising to see Samuel or Moore have a big game. Olsen, I think, leverage a little more off of that great chemistry with Cam. We'll see. We'll see where Kyle Allen's most comfortable throwing. And
I think the offense can be more timing now, Sig, versus, Cam's more of it's not that he has no timing, but it's a see it and I throw it, kind of guy. So I think there's some potential, again, it's more positive to have Cam because of all the things he brings to the offense, right. But I think they can find a way to survive.
Look, Kyle Allen played week 17 last year and Moore had 4 for 81. And Curtis Samuel had 2 for 72 and a touchdown, and Ian Thomas had 5 for 61 and a touchdown. So maybe this could be, again, 2 air raid quarterbacks. Okay, you mentioned Connor being somewhat positive. There's a reason to actually be more positive about Vance McDonald than we were before Ben Roethlisberger went out. And then there's Juju Smith-Schuster and James Washington and Narrative Street. That they play together, and they really did have that chemistry where I think that Rudolph really understands the hot zone for James Washington in terms of where you want to place the ball for him to go up and get it. So, is this more optimism? Is this more therapy on the couch for me and Steelers Nation?
Well, I think for Vance McDonald it is, because you're going to see less 4 wide. You're going to see less things spread out and empty, which was causing, Vance McDonald to have to stay in and block some. So like if you look at week 1, Sig, Vance McDonald was in for 72% of the snaps, but ran routes on 65%. So last week, in for 91% of the snaps and ran routes on 86% of the times that the quarterback dropped back. So that's positive. Opportunities, the more opportunity, the better. And then Vance McDonald came through from a fantasy standpoint. In a PPR, gave us 23 points last week. And I think play action helps Vance McDonald, right? I mean, if you think about using James Conner, use the power play action run stuff, Vance McDonald is going to be one of the guys that's going to get better matchups out of that scenario. So I like your call on Vance McDonald. As far as, James Washington goes, I agree with you. Narrative Streets, it's on fire right now because of, Rudolph and Washington and what they did back at Oklahoma State. And I do agree that, there seems to be something there that he knows what to do when Washington's in the game. Now, I think the key for, Washington, Sig, is he just has to be able to beat, press coverage. What we've seen through the preseason, what we even saw last year, is if you give this guy a cushion and you let him work into the intermediate and deep areas of the field, he can out jump people despite not being the tallest guy. He's one of those guys, Sig. It's kind of funny. It's like, I'm trying to think of who to compare him to, but it's like when you see him, you're like, there's no way that guy's 5'11". Like he looks 6'3", like his arms are just huge. Right. His hands are big. He's the highest guy to the point of the ball, on a jump ball, on a 50-50 ball. So I think that's a positive for James Washington. I think the coaches are just, they're down on him because he just can't do everything. He doesn't beat press coverage. Even in the preseason, we saw a pass where Mason Rudolph threw an interception that looked like, James Washington ran the wrong route. So there's still some mental stuff going on. One guy to just keep an eye on, Sig, in deeper leagues. I'm not saying, hey, if you're in a shallow league, go buy this guy. But Deontay Johnson was the guy last week with Moncrief Moncrief went from 90% of the snaps after that stinker of a performance down to 32%. So Deontay Johnson actually saw the biggest increase. He went to 46%, and he ran routes on 53% of the dropbacks. That's only 3% less than James Washington. So we'll have to see how I would lean slightly to Washington, to your point, Sig, because of the the chemistry that he has with Washington. But I think what we're going to see is Deontay Johnson actually could end up being the guy that's going to be on the field more. He did a better job in preseason against press coverage as well, especially in a game against the Chiefs where they basically were making all their young rookie corners press every single play.
Yeah.
So Deontay Johnson, super deep league, just a guy to keep an eye on, maybe a preemptive type waiver.
Yeah, I mean, I could be open to that. I mean, it can be open to, again, everything's okay. Everything's going to be okay because of the quality of Washington, because of the quality of Deontay Johnson and James Conner and Vance McDonald. And we'll see. Actually, I want to use the McDonald thing to just do a big picture question. Big picture, Dwain. Because something came across my timeline that I passed along on Twitter. And by it's Dwain McFarland. Context matters. Dwain McFarland, DWAIN. McFarland. Welcome to the couch. Let's come up for air for a second before we go back down. Then welcome to the couch. Dwain, you can find his work as Football Guys. You can find it at Matt Waldman RSP blog. And this is great. If you haven't heard of Dwain, then you're under a fantasy football rock, because 2019 was the summer of Dwain. And now week 3 is the couch week of Dwain here. So tight end, because I got something on my timeline, Dwain, that said, would this be a good time to pivot from Ingram up to a Kittle or Kelsey, because Daniel Jones, because Tate and Shepard will be coming back, because his value is at a short-term peak, and you can use it as a stepping stone. And first of all, I want to say that mentality in leagues when you're trading is exactly what I endorse, which is you should only be thinking about your starting lineup. Make your starting lineup better. And then catching these windows, the updrafts and downdrafts and player value. But then I do think that it's clear, and Ertz is interesting now with all these injuries in Philadelphia. So I don't want to leave Ertz out of the conversation because that offense is getting narrower. He could have like another one of these 15 catch games against Detroit. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And his stock might catch fire. But Kittle's going to be great, fine. And Kelsey, we already know what he can do. And I really like trying to climb all the way to the top of the totem pole at tight end, Dwain, because unlike running back, I don't see churn that's going to create new producers there by week 10 or 14. I think we know with the picture we see at tight end, it's pretty much how it's going to be this year. And you might be able to get in as a stepping stone, but I don't know if you're going to be like, hopefully smart people aren't going to trade Kelsey or Kittle down to like a not sure thing producer at tight end. That's not a way to build a winning team unless you get some ridiculous deal. But so it's kind of two layers to this, Dwain. One is like, what do you think? Really, we could go as many as you want, but like one is trading philosophy. Another is the tight end landscape this year. And what do you think of it after 2 weeks? And then others, obviously, these individual players involved. But really, I'm just curious, what's your angle at attacking tight end now that we're 2 weeks in?
Yeah, no. First, on the trading philosophy, I'm with you. That's the approach that I endorse as well, especially if you're in some of these shallower leagues where there's always going to be stuff on the wire. It's all about making that. It's all about fortifying the roster. If you're in a deeper league with deeper benches, sometimes that can add some more consideration. But what I love about the thought process is you've got someone that's thinking ahead, right? You're thinking about Daniel Jones coming into the picture. You're thinking about Golden Tate returning. Sterling Shepard's going to be coming back probably this week. So Evan Ingram, at a minimum, is going to have other viable options around him. And you're going to be going to a rookie quarterback. So I absolutely, if you can use Evan Ingram as a stepping stone right now to get yourself up towards that very top of the tier, your Kelseys, your Kittles. I'm all about doing it right now. I think it's a great time to do it. Now, I wouldn't do it just to do it. It would have to be to make a move like that. I think it's good as a stepping stone because I think there's also the potential that, when those other guys come back, I don't know about you, Sig. I don't think a lot about Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard. I'm just hoping they're just enough to make people just not double Ingram the whole game.
Yeah.
Maybe that actually helps Ingram, but there are a lot of questions. If I could use him as a stepping stone, I would. To the second part of your question, as far as the tight ends and the way it's going to shake out for this year, I think you're right. I think here's a big thing come up for air, and this will probably apply to multiple parts of the show. But Sig, I feel like we're just coming out of the final week of the preseason.
Right.
So many coaches that were new this year, offensive coordinators, so many installs. I know we're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers later. I mean, we're going to talk about Kirk Cousins, I'm sure. There's so many of these guys that are still learning a new offense, didn't play a ton in the preseason. We're just seeing a lot of sloppy football on both sides of the ball, really, defense and on offense. A lot of, teams playing some really bad teams out of the gate. And we're trying to figure out where they're at. But what I just want to say from a big picture standpoint real quick is I think we're going to start seeing, there will be some new trends that will emerge, right, over these next few weeks. We've got a couple of data points, but it's almost like half of these teams are still in that preseason phase. Now, having said that, for tight end, what I would say to your point, I don't know how much more is really going to your point, come through the churn, right? Because TJ Hawkinson jumps out and does it week 1. So he's gone. If he was available on your waiver, he's gone. Darren Waller jumps out and plays 100% of the snaps, sees all of these targets week 1. So he's gone. Some of the guys that we thought, we really like those guys, but in a shallower league, maybe they're still available. We can grab them in a few weeks. No, you can't, because it already happened. It's already over. Now, you could see a guy like Dallas Goedert get healthy, and if for some reason something happens to a Zach Ertz, that's a rock, right? That maybe later we could look under and you find, oh my gosh, look at all this gold I just found. But that's predicated on other things happening to open that door. So to your point, if you can go get an elite tight end, and you can make it work for you, I do like doing it, because I don't see a lot of paths to value for some of these guys, except for some of the things that I think, will happen based on once we see these teams really start playing their offenses. I think there will be a few guys that'll sneak through the cracks, but not near as many, to your point, as there will be runners. Yeah,
this is tough. It may be, a name that comes up. We'll go on a tight end tangent here. Cloud R says, Andrew. Again, this is a big part of what we're doing right now, Dwayne, especially as we're talking about DFS and looking just at week 3 and projections and start sit recommendations and things like that, is how do so solve for X, and X is the amount that the matchups in week 1 and 2 have skewed our perception of teams, right? And Mandrew and Lamar Jackson, for that matter, and Marquise Brown too. How much is it that it was Arizona and Miami? Now this week it's Kansas City, so I don't know how much more we're going to learn unless Jalen Ramsey gets traded to Kansas City. Let's see that happen, just because we want to blow up the Death Star. So Mark Andrews, I mean, obviously he's not going to have 1,900 yards receiving, and God, would he be over 200 catches? Close to 200? I mean, I don't even know. It would be ridiculous. Crazy. 150 catches or something like that. But is it going to be a hard landing, Dwayne, where we're back to last year's feast or famine, kind of like the first 2 weeks for TJ Hawkinson? Or, maybe if you can't get a Kelsey or a Kittle or an Ertz because of name value, or Ingram, Mark Andrews, a lot of people draft as their second tight end. Is actually the shark angle here to go after Andrews because he's not going to fall, or is the shark angle trade Matthews because this is a mirage?
Yeah, Andrews is one of the super tough calls, Sig. And so here's why. One, in the offense that he's in, with the way Baltimore's running this offense, which is beautiful. And to hit on your first point, yes, part of it is the Dolphins. That's part of it. The Cardinals defense is actually playing a little better than we thought they might, Sig. So
that's true.
I mean, I don't want to just
competing.
Yeah, they're competing for not having Patrick Peterson out there and going through all the turnover they had. It's not been terrible, right? So if I just quickly take a peek, like you said, Kansas City, that doesn't really worry me. Cleveland, decent, but they're not scaring everybody as much as we thought, because the offense isn't jumping out to these leads that we thought Cleveland might have. Then you get Pittsburgh, then you get Cincinnati, then you get Seattle. All of those defenses have questions. So I think the schedule looks fine. Are those teams going to be harder to deal with? Yeah, but here's what I want to see with Baltimore. This offense is so intriguing to me because of the bind that it puts these teams in. It's okay. We've got Mark Andrews. Really, people have to know that Lamar Jackson, he's best throwing down the numbers. And that's where Mark Andrews operates. Think about Greg Roman. Who did he used to have in San Francisco with Kaepernick? Who was his tight end?
Vernon Davis. And that's what we're seeing. Remember those years where Vernon Davis would be boom bust. He'd be boom one year and bust 15
the next.
touchdowns and 55 catches or something. Yeah.
And so that element's still here with Mark Andrews. The problem is that Lamar Jackson is playing so good. And the element now that Marquise Brown is bringing on the outside, it's like, okay, can a team truly stop these three these three elements. I've got to worry about Lamar Jackson in the running game, plus Mark Ingram or Gus Edwards or Justice Hill, whoever's in there. The running game is great. And then I've got basically these other two weapons, but it's like the defense has to choose. So I'm interested to see if one of these teams can do it. The other interesting thing with Mark Andrews, Sig, is he's only running routes on like 60% of, Lamar Jackson's passes. So not only do we have one of the teams that, won't throw it a lot of weeks because they won't have to. Now we have a player on the team that's not even in the route, is not even seeing 80-90% of the routes like you would want. So that tells me that Mark Andrews is still going to have certain weeks where, a defense is going to choose to take him away. And that's going to, and if I was playing them, Sig, that's what I would do. I would try to force Lamar Jackson to throw outside the numbers because that's where he struggles.
Right.
And I would take my chances with Marquise Brown beating me deep outside, but I would try to take away the inside and I would try to take away the running game. Now, I don't know if anybody can do that, but to your question on the shark angle, it's a really hard one, for me. Me, I tend to lean towards, how does this continue at this rate of usage, which would make me think Mark Andrews is a sell high. But then when I look at the tight end landscape and I think, to your point, what else is around? I'm like, I'm just going to hold him. And if I can go trade for him, I would. But here's the problem. He's going to be such a high. I would wait. Here's what my advice would be, Sig. The week that he comes down,
right,
and it will happen, that's when you go trade for him. You can't go get him right now. I mean, it's going to be ludicrous what the other owner, rightfully so, right, should ask for the price.
Yes, but always ask.
Always ask. Yes.
Every week in fantasy football, there are the complaints of, I can't believe I just saw this player traded for this player in my league, and trade vetoes, which should not be in any league for any reason. Nope. In case I have to remind you that. So there's so many things to talk about. We're not even come close to talking about everything in an hour. It's been really stimulating. I mean, it's been chaotic, but the first 2 weeks of the season have been really stimulating this year in terms of, there hasn't been that many things to just say, well, that's boring. There's nothing going on there. And there's been a lot of things that are moving targets, like the offenses we'll talk about. But I want to step back. And by the way, folks might notice that Dwain's you're super polished, man, because you're doing the hustle, the at FF hustle with Brian Drake at Drake Fantasy. Great guy. You
just made Brian's day. I had to give him a shout out. He got it from Sig.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. Q's in the house. Dwain, you put out these charts. If folks aren't following Dwain, you're really missing out. How many people have you added to your Twitter followers in the last month and a half, Dwain? Like 10,000 or something?
Yeah,
I'm underestimating. I don't even know.
That's on the high side. I was at 1,500, I think, when the first preseason game hit, and I'm over 8,000 now.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave that in the dust. That's just that asymptotic curve is going to continue to dive up because you're putting out things on Twitter that it's not just, and man, you're just so with the football guys and Matt Waldman ethos, because it's not just how you come to your actionable conclusions or your content that we create, but you provide people with active minds. I think that's one of the things that's very much a cohesive thing in our community is just people with active minds, people with live minds that like cats. I always talk about the cat and the ball of yarn, like a puzzle. Give us a puzzle, give us something to juggle in our head and try to see patterns, find something in the signal among the noise. So you're putting these utilization charts out. I mean, talk about that, because what's cool is people can look at it and draw their own conclusions or use it to test their own hypotheses. But also just your process, man, because you have a process, I feel like, that is super. It's just like Matt Waldman. I mean, I think about this where it's like music, you're highly prepared and precise and tuned in your thoughts so that when it comes time to improvise, like when we have these new offenses to project, you're able to go on a tear, like surf on that wave. So just tell us about your process.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I always like to think, Sig, what are the big questions I have, in my mind, just whether it be as a fan, whether it's as a fantasy football player. And really that's where everything I do starts. It started with me just being like, I wonder about that. Why is that like that? And that's really where this whole idea around the utilization report came from. I'm from data and analytics. I work in the healthcare space. And so I was always working with data and insights to help give these doctors or supply chain leaders answers to help guide them along their path. But it was never just about, just give me the answer. It was, let me see like the 8 or 9 really pertinent pieces of information all in context of one another. And then let me think through that because, every patient's different, Dwayne, kind of a thing. So that's really the way NFL offenses are too. You can't just say, it's going to exactly be this way. We have our ideas and then things get blown up, injuries happen. There's so much going on. That's really the whole idea behind these utilization reports. And the idea here is that you can come in and you can quickly see, okay, what are the trends around a player? Are they playing more? Are they playing less? What was the context of the game? Did they lose? Did they lose by a lot? Were they able to run a lot of plays? Oh, they didn't run hardly any plays. Well, it's because they won by 21 points. So it's it's one thing to know if an offense runs, a play every, or runs 2.57 plays per minute. It's another thing to know that they did that whenever they were playing from ahead versus trailing, right? So it's trying to give everybody the information to see what the offense looks like as a whole, and then see how each of these players plug in. So like I drive Brian Drake crazy on our pod, Sig, because I struggle to talk about one player without talking about the offense
right.
and how they fit in it. Because
I want to interject because it's like quarterback wins isn't a stat. Well, no stat is a stat then. Every stat reflects the efforts of every player in some way, and it's the relationships and the way that they're interdependent that we're trying to get a handle on. Nothing is isolated, even though we just put a name on a player and think of it as this isolated factor anyway.
No, I'm with you. It's just like the context you asked for when someone says, hey, should I make this trade? Should I drop this guy? You're like, well, Is it a small league? Is it a medium league? Is it a deep bench? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's the same thing, right? So this happens across everything we do in the universe. Football's no different. But yeah, the feedback around these have been great because you can quickly see what I like to look for, Sig, or what are the underlying drivers to performance? And I've spent a lot of time studying that, and so it's one thing to see targets and see carries. But what I also want to know is, how often is the player on the field when the team's actually passing? If it's a receiver, I don't really care about snaps. I want to know how often are they running a route whenever the quarterback drops back to pass. That's way more valuable. So that helps you with a guy like Mark Andrews, Sig, because what you would see is you would say, 40% of the snaps, that's terrible. But then you see, but 65% of the routes. You still want that to be higher, but that tells you they want him on the field when they're passing.
Right.
And so for a passing option, then that makes sense. So that's really where these came from. And I feel like the thing that gets skipped over the most, Sig, people know what the stats are. They know how many yards guys are getting. They know how many touchdowns guys are getting. But what they don't know, they don't often pay attention to how they got there and what may be driving that. So that's really the whole thing behind the utilization report. If I think about like fantasy production, it like comes at the intersection of efficiency and opportunity. So what I try to do with these reports, Sig, is just really lay out, this is what creates opportunity, all of this.
Right.
Now you can go, what the production's been, what the player's done, you're watching the games, now go pit this against that, and then use that, to your point, to kind of work through the puzzle yourself, and then think through, what are the best paths forward.
And I'm picturing, Dwayne, as you draw that word picture, like the seed in the soil, it's almost like opportunities, the soil, efficiency is like the rain and the sunlight that allows that seed to grow. Like opportunity can be barren soil. They're Miami's offense, right?
Dante Moncrief.
Yeah.
He had that opportunity week one. Sorry.
Exactly.
Sorry, we're trying to move on. We're trying to move on from the dark place.
That's okay. No, honestly, for real, I would probably love to just take this thing and steer it into like, we were talking about things before we came on, folks, like compulsive gambling. My father's a compulsive gambler. And he would love to probably come on the show and tell people about his experience as a compulsive gambler and how to help them, and how, what we do in some ways, it scratches that itch of wanting to, like, I don't know, just when I was a kid, man, I used to take 2 like old butter containers, and take the top Pigeon Creek in Bentleyville, Pennsylvania, and put them like at the top of the creek, and just in my mind think like which one's going to get there first. You know what I mean? Like I would just make up those kinds of things to engage in this activity. Anyway,
it's funny though what you do as a kid and how it.
Oh yeah, I used to walk around with
do.
Go ahead.
So you know what I used to do? So back whenever video games, before they tracked your stats and all of that, like my mom would be like, "What are you doing?" I would be playing like the old Nintendo, and each game was literally everything started over. I would, at the end of my game, I would write down the stats for all my players. And then I would go play my next game like it was week 2 of the season. Like I was simulating the season. I was creating this season before there was even seasons. And I was keeping my stat. My mom's like, "You are such a nerd."
Yeah, no, I could go off on any number of tangents here, because I used to take a sock ball and throw it from one end to the other and see how many times I could catch it before it hit the ground. And I would have a league that was all 50 states. And I would even play like 10 or, I don't even know. I could stay when I was like 6 or 7 years old, I could spend all weekend in my room, like playing these little leagues in my head. And another time when my stepdad was a professional boxer, and I went to the gym where he trained boxers, and I left my book of baseball statistics. I used to listen to the baseball games on the radio and hand score the games and update, with my eraser, my home runs and RBIs and things like that. And I left it there, and he said, "Well, I knew this didn't belong to any of these boxers. It must have been yours." I used to walk around with a tape recorder too. So here we are talking. I used to interview the people in my family. And I think that, Dwayne, you crystallized this for me, that I really should ask this. Everybody that comes on the couch should get this question at least once. Like, what did you pretend to be when you were a kid? And in this day and age, I think a lot of people feel like they're drifting and not really rooted, and sometimes maybe going back to that as a way to find your way. It's like a point on the compass, like in you, in you somewhere, where you fit in the universe, and the circuit completes, and then like you give yourself over, and it fills you back up, and it's that beautiful cycle. That's when we're at our best. That's when the light really comes out, is when we're in that balance, in that cycle with the world. And I think, for some people, just like watching the game and getting emotionally involved in the game, or if you're in the stadium, it's almost tangible that you're part of this like hive mind of like tens of thousands of people, and it relieves your burdens of being in that one person that you have and that one thing in your life that sometimes can weigh you down. I think that that's actually like part of the story that's happening here, is while we're talking about this stuff and thinking about this stuff, it's like we have a wall around us of the stuff that brings us down. But you want to keep bringing up the Steelers. So I'm going to keep coming down. But real quickly, I'm down here in New Orleans, Teddy Bridgewater, and I feel like, why can't Taysom Hill play at least a couple of series a game? Maybe more, maybe even being open, him being the starting quarterback. But what are your thoughts? You mentioned Kamara and Thomas. No one's going to trade them. Well, for those people that are stuck with them, what are they stuck with?
Like you said, always try, but I don't see them having a big discount. Here's what I do see. Actually, you know what? Matt Wallman wrote a great article on this on his top 10 this week at Football Guys. And I think he's like number 6 or number 7. He talks about the Saints with Teddy Bridgewater. And what's interesting is it's exactly what played out in this utilization report. It's where film and data like perfectly mesh together, Sig. It doesn't, sometimes they're contrary to one another, which is fine too, because then you learn something from that. But what Matt talked about in the article was really that, he sees Jared Cook and Michael Thomas, their volume and their opportunities probably still going to be there, because that's the area of the field that Teddy Bridgewater is going to work. But what he talked about is the efficiency being lower, because you lose. Yeah, Teddy Bridgewater's been with the team. He knows how to come out. He knows what the play is in his mind. And he knows, okay, this is what I'm going to run. He's even going to know the audibles. But Brees, all of those little like game within the game, the little hand signal behind the line that's not even really about changing the whole play. It's just seeing the way this cornerback is lined up and how this safety's creeping down that equals all of a sudden an instant touchdown, or it's an instant mismatch for Kamara out of the backfield and he hits him immediately versus waiting to make him his third read. Those things are gone. So the efficiency of these players and the big plays are going to come down. Jared Cook and Michael Thomas should be insulated to some extent because of the areas of the field Brees likes to work.
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater likes to work. The guys that probably take the biggest step back, that most folks probably weren't depending on a lot unless you're in a deeper league, Sig, but it's Traquan Smith and Ted Ginn Jr. because Teddy Bridgewater is not that great with the deep ball. And these things, like I said, all played out last week in the data. Ted Ginn Jr., 0% of the targets. The week before had 16%. Traquan Smith, actually, you saw his routes actually ran per dropback dropped down from 73% to 59%. I don't know if Traquan may have been dinged up. I didn't read anything about that, but he wasn't on the field as much. So it's probably going to be fine for Cook and Thomas as far as their overall volume goes, but it's not going to be, as to your point earlier, it's not, the soil's not as fertile now. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, Latavius Murray, right? I mean, just less chances for him to finish drives. Maybe they could become more conservative. I still think, I don't, for fantasy too, Dwayne, I'm really fascinated with Taysom Hill. I mean, we haven't had an entity like someone that can play like 2 or 3 drives at quarterback, including a lot of running, maybe get out there and get some snaps at wide receiver and tight end, used more in the red zone. So I want to make sure to touch on these offenses because I think it's the biggest story. But I want to, I think my brain is still, some wheels are still turning about the idea of like efficiency and opportunity and how we handle that. Because what's interesting, Dwayne, is like we, outside of the season, when we're putting our rankings together and projections, we have these deep conversations, like academic conversations about it. But once the season's going, we're just, it's like the wind's in your hair and there's not a lot of time to slow down and think about it. But each of these micro decisions that we're making stand for some sort of mindset or approach to this in a way that you might even have a moment of self-awareness, like an epiphany, Dwayne, where you say like, well, all offseason I argued for this, but now that I'm in the season, I realize like, oh, this is actually a lot more important to me than I felt like when I was in a more sterile offseason environment. But I mean, is there anything to even talk about with the Jets? I mean, you're not. I mean, Le'Veon Bell, sure. Le'Veon Bell and Leonard Fournette are the guys that might have the most touches without scoring a touchdown this year. But is there anything here?
I don't think so. I mean, they're going to run a ton of 11 personnel. So you're still going to see plenty of Robbie Anderson. You're still going to see, plenty of Crowder. You get Chris Herndon back, in another 2 weeks, Sig.
Yeah.
You need Sam Darnold back for the next couple of weeks. I'm trying to avoid this situation as much, especially this next week, because the Patriots, they're going to take away the one thing they fear. That's probably Robbie Anderson. You should bench him everywhere. And they're probably going to be happy to let Jamison Crowder catch 10 passes if Falk can, in fact, complete those passes. And they're fine with letting Le'Veon Bell catch checkdowns.
Yeah. So a PPR, those cheap PPR points for him. The Giants, and this, because we mentioned already with that tweet that I got about Evan Ingram. But just, I guess, Daniel Jones' viability. I mean, actually, the way the quarterback got thin pretty quickly, there might be some people looking at Daniel Jones. Is there something viable here, not just in Superflex or 2 quarterback leagues? Could this actually improve the offense a la Pittsburgh and Mason Rudolph?
I think I have more questions, with this particular one, Sig, just because all I've seen from Daniel Jones was in college. He didn't look very good, super low completion percentage rate. And then we saw him look better in preseason versus vanilla defenses. So it's like, what? I don't know where the truth lies with Daniel Jones, to be honest. He's not a guy that Matt Waldman was super high on as far as his processing, the way he thinks through things. But having said that, it's not like I don't know how it can be much of a downgrade from Eli Manning, unless he comes out. Now, Eli, we know his accuracy had gone. We know his arm strength had gone. But at least Eli wasn't throwing, a ton of picks. He's known to make those boneheaded moves. But what I worry about with Daniel Jones is if he comes out and he starts getting confused with what a defense is showing him before the snap, and then they start changing it after, which is going to happen now. You don't see that a lot in preseason. That's the test that we have to see him pass. I mean, ultimately, I don't know. He's one of the guys I honestly will just say, I don't want to try to lead people one way or another. I don't know what to do with him.
Yeah.
I'm hoping he can sustain Evan Ingram. But a lot of what we got scared about, thinking of deep thinking ahead of the season, Sig, a lot of folks, and I even had this in my head and I thought about it and talked about it a lot. Man, I was just scared of the Giants because, Barkley's everything. And now we're seeing that. He's even getting these big runs, but, can he really score, 10, 12, 13 touchdowns in this offense this season? I don't know. Yeah. I mean, because teams are focusing everything they have on him. So for the hope of Saquon Barkley, we need Daniel Jones to show something.
Yeah, he's the player. That was one of my hesitations of having Barkley number 1 way back in like May. And then, Zeke held out. And then Peyton said that's about Kamara.
Think about that now. Zeke's easily number 1 again. Like,
right.
He's in a tier by himself now. It used to be a tier of 4. Today, he's in a tier of 1 by itself.
He is, especially even with Dwayne less receiving. I mean, he might not even come close to his targets from last year because of how this offense has evolved. Yet he's still the running back that you want. There's so many things. So I guess another subtopic I want to try to touch on, because we've got about 20 minutes left. So although it's so comfortable, Dwayne, We're settled in here. But I want to try to touch on my some stuff. Well, let me ask you this, because behind the scenes, send some notes back and forth. Say, here's some of the things we might talk about. Was there anything on the list of things I sent you? You're like, oh, I'm excited to talk about that. I definitely want to make sure that we talk about that as people are again looking backwards at week 2, looking forwards to week 3, doing all this stuff. Because I want to make sure we talk about some of these teams that 2 weeks in, are we being duped into making the wrong conclusion, or can we go with what we've seen? But there's a lot of stuff with rookie running backs and rookie wide receivers. There's been players that are we ready to pull a plug on them yet? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I love talking about obviously the teams, and I think if we need to move rapid pace, we can here. So New England, you had asked me about the Patriots, and we talked about the Ravens. Sorry, we talked about the Ravens kind of already. Yeah. I think so. I think we've shared where we are. Let's see if a defense can stop them. They've got plenty of weapons. They are going to regress some because the competition is going to get tougher. But I think big thing on Marquise Brown. Oh my goodness, Sig! Like the guy, it's not just that he's fast. It's like how well he runs routes and manipulates defensive backs. And if you guys haven't heard of on Twitter, J Moyer FB, JMOYER FB. He does work at the RSP. Oh my goodness, these video breakdowns the guy does, like in 2 minutes, you learn right. It takes some people 10 years to learn about football. Go watch what he put out there about Marquise Brown and the way he manipulates these cornerbacks. And so Sig, think about, where is the convergence point of talent and opportunity? And it's never static is the thing that's crazy and why it's so hard for us, because think about Marquise Brown, week 1, Sig, 18% of the snaps, 29% of routes each time Lamar Jackson dropped back. Last week, 84% of the routes. If I thought that was going to happen the week ahead, I would have said 50%, go put it on Marquise Brown.
Yeah.
I thought he would slowly have to climb the ladder. In some cases, coaches just see it and they're like, in rational coaching, tip of the hat to you. That's something you've always talked about, happens, and it just explodes. So, but we can move on from Baltimore. So, New England running back, Sig, we've got the famous
3-headed running back. Yeah.
I love how your inflection, like your voice.
Because there was a time to go take a Belichick back, and then we're back.
Yeah, we're back. And so, I mean, here's the thing. Michelle is the guy that's going to get, 50 to 60% of the carries. You just need the Patriots to be ahead, and he's always going to have a chance for a touchdown. James White is the guy that, he's the receiving back. So there's not a lot of room for Michelle there, even though we had heard rumblings of, Michelle's going to run more routes, blah, blah, blah. That's just really not happening. But what, James White needs is he just needs more competitive game scripts. And right now it's like, now they get to play the Jets this week. It's like
Washington, and then
there's no challenge right now for New England. That's the sad part. But the receivers, I think, is where people have the bigger questions right now. Sig, is what do we do with the receivers? And so Antonio Brown, I don't think I've ever seen a stat like this before in my life, Sig. So last week, Antonio, and I'm sure you've already seen this on Twitter, but Antonio Brown was on the field for 34% of the snaps. He ran routes on 47% of Brady's dropbacks, and he had a 29% target share.
Yeah.
That's insane. So I think he's clearly I have no clue what's going to happen legally. We don't even have to talk about that. But as long as he's on the field, you have to consider him their number one option, and he's a wide receiver 1. I think this bumps Edelman down into the wide receiver 3 range, because I see Edelman, I had it like a 25% target share. Now I've got him at like a 20% for the rest of the way, Sig. As long as Antonio Brown is on the team, I'm thinking 20, 22%. And in these games where the Patriots just aren't challenged to have to throw the ball, this is bad. Right. This is bad for Edelman. I think he could still be an engine for the offense and more competitive scripts, but I just don't know when that's going to get here. And then Josh Gordon is really a boom bust flex wide receiver, 4 kind of guy right now until, we see what happens with AB.
Yeah. And Gordon's not the same. Gordon doesn't look like Gordon from 5 years ago. He doesn't have quite that same breakaway speed. And like you said, they don't need to take low percentage throws downfield to him. The Steelers' touchdown was just a total breakdown in the Steelers' defense. But to the point of that New England schedule, at Buffalo actually next week, which sounds like Buffalo's defense is going to be credible. But then Washington, the Giants, the Jets, Cleveland, Baltimore, week 9.
Yeah, there's no challenge until then.
Right. And then Philadelphia and Dallas, Houston, and Kansas City. So there's some interesting games there for the Death Star. I'm officially adopting that. That's going to be their name all year. Efficiency, and I'm glad you talked about that thing with Marquise Brown, and this goes into like Patrick Mahomes, because one of the things I want to toss to you on a big picture is the idea of efficiency and regression to the mean, and generally wanting to say the urge out there sometimes in the collective wisdom to say fade high efficiency. Where you see high efficiency, it's unsustainable, and it can create expectations that are unsustainable. Where I come in more, and I think your Marquise Brown take illuminated what the side I would want to represent, which is where you see high efficiency, you may see something very special. And those very special things are the things that can win fantasy leagues. Mark Andrews is another good example last year, because you could say, well, but he wasn't getting enough opportunity to be consistent for your fantasy lineup. But you could say, look what he did with the opportunity he has if he just gets more. Now, that leads us to OJ Howard too. Okay. It doesn't always work out, but high efficiency is, the Patrick Mahomes issue. And this was where Chase Stewart would say, well, we don't know every player's actual mean. Yes, players will regress to their mean, but not every player has the same mean. Everyone's mean is different, and in the situation, context matters, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we get into sell high, buy low conversations and things like that. So, what's your reaction when in your numbers 2 weeks in you see something that looks unsustainable because the efficiency is higher than anything we expect?
Yeah, I think if you take that argument as a whole, right, and you just put it blanket, and this is what I found with even studying things outside of fantasy football, when studying the league and things like do running backs matter and all these things, really the answer, Sig, is, no one wants to hear this, is it depends.
Right.
It comes back to the situation. So when I see, something like, what's going on with Kansas City, and I see how special Patrick Mahomes is, but then I watch the film and see him beat zone. I watch him beat press coverages. I watch him make throws that we've also never seen
exactly
people consistently make. It's like, okay, it's just like what Chase is saying. So where really is Patrick Mahomes' mean? You can't just say that he's going to, regress. I think right now you have to assume that Patrick Mahomes' mean is somewhere between some of the best seasons that we've seen over the last 10 years and the one he had last year, which was one of the absolute best. So it's somewhere in that range, I think, right now. Now, could that change? Yeah, I mean, because a lot of things can happen in the season, but with where we're sitting right now, for him to be able to do that with Tyreek Hill still, not even playing, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, to take a DeMarcus Robinson, who I consider, Sig, to be more of a possession receiver kind of guy, right, and the guy has 6 catches for, almost 200 yards and, over how many touchdowns, that it was, I projected the guy for 6 catches on the week, and he had 6 catches, but I thought it would be 80 yards. I didn't think it would be, what he had. And when I watched the game, it's Mahomes. He elevates everyone.
Yeah.
And so I think the same thing with the Ravens. I think we really could be seeing something special. I think, do I think they're going to regress? Yes. But do I think they're going to regress to what, data that's a zoom out looking at, the last 10 years of data for quarterback in this kind of situation? It's a moving target to some extent, and I am an analytics guy, so I like to have the answer. I'd like it to be black and white. It's just not always that easy whenever, to your point, you put everything into context.
Exactly. Well, thank you. That's the context matters again, right? It's fantastic. We can keep coming back to this, Dwain. But so as we see these things like running backs don't matter, and there was one earlier this offseason, like sacks are a quarterback stat. There was another one that's like passing to the running back is not that efficient or less efficient than passing to other positions. And I feel like, okay, these things are good to start conversations, not to finish conversations. And as you said, it depends. And they never are, they're like cursory, like introductory material to answering the question of what's going to happen in the next instance of this particular case. So when you throw all the data in a bucket and you average it out, you might have something for like a conversation. But if you're saying, tell me what the next instance of this one point of data in that bucket is, because then you can start getting to, well, it's a 60-40 thing. Okay, well, is this case going to be more in the 40 or the 60? What do all the cases in the 40s have in common? What do all the cases in the 60 have in common? Now we're starting to have a conversation where data is intersecting with reality. But like you said, Patrick Mahomes' numbers look ridiculous. It looked like something that like broke our conception of what's possible on a football field. And then when you watch him, he's ridiculous. He breaks our conception of what's possible on a football field. So you say, and you cut through all that noise and say, this is special. I want to get any piece of it at all. Anything. Like Patrick Mahomes is magic, basically. And anybody, if it's Byron Pringle, who I missed that he actually got re-added after he got cut. If it's Byron Pringle in 2 weeks, Dwayne, then we're saying, well, Byron Pringle's going to have 4 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown. It really, some guy that, was cut, Damian Patterson, if they pick him up off of the street and put him in, he'll have 3 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown because it's Mahomes and really the intersection of Mahomes and Reed that's created this. And I love your excitement. I love your excitement about Baltimore too. It's very exciting. And what we see is the excitement comes where there's the will with the coaches to create something that is outside of the norm, outside of the range of things that have happened before. But I want to make this more about you now in the last 10 minutes, Dwayne. Okay. Give me a player. Give me a player that, or even like a situation that you were really high on going into the season and you've already given up on.
That I've just completely...
well, maybe not completely given up, but you've already accepted like your scenario is not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I have a couple of those actually. So if we want to walk through, one of them, Sig, and I think, thinking back to, football guys stuff preseason when we would do some of the stuff behind the scenes there, for me, Devonta Freeman is one of those guys where it's like, I'm not going to bail on him. He's still going to be a starting running back in my lineups. But, Sig, I just thought it was his chance to truly own the backfield.
Yep.
I thought this offense was going to get off to a hotter start than what they have. And it's one of those situations where if Kansas City's an example or Baltimore is an example of everything breaking right, Atlanta's like an example of, a majority of things just going wrong. I mean, they spent the picks on the offensive line. Now both of those guys are hurt. I haven't heard the latest on Caleb McGarry on what's going to happen with him, but we know we lost Lindstrom the week before. And when you watch the game, there's no room to run, Sig.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go. And so that's concerning to me. Ito Smith getting carries inside the 5-yard line. So he's not completely dead to me, but Freeman was a guy that as, we came into August, I felt like, man, in the 3rd round, like he's the back that I kind of settled on that I just felt the best about. I thought some of the other guys were a little more explosive, but I felt like his situation was good. I thought the offense was good. I thought the line was going to be better. I thought, positive. And now I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's like, where did it all go? Now, there's still a chance for him because, again, that's a new coordinator as well. Yes, Matt Ryan played with Dirk Cotter before, but all those offensive linemen didn't play, with Dirk Cotter. All of these other players didn't play with Dirk Cotter. So I think the offense is going to improve, and maybe that helps Freeman. But I'm just seeing a little too much Ito Smith, for my taste buds.
Yep.
Sig, that's really bothering me. Another guy that I kind of went out on a limb for. With folks, just we're waiting on tight end. And again, I'm not completely gone on it, but I really thought that in the Kubiak scheme that I honestly thought Kyle Rudolph, because of the matchup.
This is the barren soil though, right?
Yeah. Well, this soil is, actually, I guess there's nothing happening. There's no rain and then there's no soil. It's just, there's like, I don't
concrete.
know what Yes. There's a seed and it's laying on concrete and it's named Kyle Rudolph and it's 100 degrees outside. But here's what I want to say. Kirk Cousins looks terrible. So what do we really know about this offense yet?
Yeah,
we had a game where they were so far ahead of Atlanta, they just shut the offense down. And then we have a game where Cousins was so bad, it killed everything. And where does Cousins like to throw the ball, Sig? Inside the numbers.
Yeah.
Well, now they're playing 21. They're playing 12 personnel. Guess who works inside the numbers? It's Rudolph. And so I still feel like there's a chance, but he's a guy that I'm like, fine. People drop him. And then how it goes, Sig, when you make a stand on a guy like that for somebody, then it turns, when it doesn't happen, you're like the worst person ever.
No, but then it's not over yet because then you have to make that call like with Kiki Cutie. Yeah, drop Kiki Cutie. I mean, look, the Houston offense, speaking of offenses that have been, it's hard to draw a conclusion based on what we've seen, but I like the way you frame that with Minnesota that, maybe Green Bay's defense is just really good. Of course, maybe also Mitchell Trubisky is just not that good because we're watching Denver play Green Bay. Isn't that funny how the math works there? Mitchell Trubisky sucked against Green Bay and Denver. Green Bay's defense might be good because they made Kirk Cousins look bad, and now we get to see Kirk Cousins against Oakland this weekend. So that could be maybe a get-right game because, as you said, they took the foot off the gas in Week 1 against Atlanta. On the Freeman, I'm with you on Freeman. And I thought that third-round running back question was so important because there were so many possibilities there.
It turns out you should have just taken Amari Cooper and ignored the
right and ignored Amari Cooper in the heel or Jake and George Kittle. I think Kittle was a fine third, or Patrick Mahomes in the leagues where Patrick Mahomes was there, and that was something. And that I'm not going to do victory laps and things like that. I don't like to do that. But I think now we look back. Would you say, Dwayne, at this moment, Patrick Mahomes is a first round pick? I mean, even in expert leagues, people would take him in the first round now.
I don't think so, just because we have all this other new data as well, and it's going to adjust the way people approach all the other players that we now feel better about.
Sure.
And just because if you're when you say expert league, what I think of immediately, Sig, is I think of at least 12 teams. I think of at least 20 round draft. So there's nothing on the wire, hardly ever. And if there is, you literally have to drop normally I love your waiver wire piece each week, your upgrade downgrade. We're like, 3 to 5%, 10 to 15%, like multiply all those by 3 leagues because it's so rare that anyone's available. So knowing that, and usually in these leagues, Sig, you're playing 2 receivers, 2 running backs, 2 flex, and you're in a deep league with deep benches. So in those leagues, I still see Mahomes probably being, I think third round is kind of his sweet spot still because of the other things that change. But what I wouldn't make an argument, against, is there a way to, make Mahomes part of your winning equation and work around it? I think you could. I think absolutely you could because of what he's doing. And we're still going to get Tyreek Hill back eventually. And
to be clear, the reason I say first round pick, Dwayne, is because if we could go back and re-engineer ADP, you'd say, well, third round pick in preseason drafts, because you could get Lamar Jackson in the 10th round or Dak Prescott in the 10th round. But if we were drafting today, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, these guys.
They're 6th, 7th round picks.
Probably. Right. They're going where Deshaun Watson was going. And you might say, well, they don't get Deshaun Watson later, but I don't know if that's going to be wise. Third round running backs, a lot of landmines. I mean, we'll see about Chris Carson in the fumbling. Actually, again, some of these guys that fell out, like Marlon Mack and Derrick Henry, who are game script dependent, actually doing okay. I mean, in the AFC South, everyone's going to be competitive and it's going to be ugly games. But if that's good games for the Mack and Henry game plan, and you know what I was going to say about Devontae Freeman, Dwayne, is that NFC South is turning into that division too, huh? I mean, it used to be a shootout division. It's going to be a slot fest division now.
Yeah, and that's
Tampa wants to play slot.
Yeah, you don't have to score points to win anymore.
So Jameis Winston and Tampa and Mike Evans, like real quick before we tie a bow on.
Let's hit Tampa. Let's hit Tampa
because it's boring, but it's working, and they can win the division being boring.
Yes, but if you think about the offense, right? They're clearly, even though this is Bruce Arians, and actually Jason Wood, give him props. He wrote a great article about Bruce Arians isn't a miracle worker in this offseason. So if you haven't read it, it's even fun to go back and read now. Yeah. But if you look at Tampa Bay and you think about, people are asking about OJ Howard. So the beauty is, right, and this is where these things can be deceiving, playing more snaps than ever, Sig. Right. And he's a great talent. But then you have Bruce Arians saying, oh, well, he could play better. And then if you look at his routes ran in week 1, and despite playing 80% of the snaps, he's only running routes on 55% of the plays. The second week, he only runs route on 66% of the plays. So it's not because he's leaving the field and Cameron Brate's taking his work. It's that the offensive line is terrible.
Right.
And he's the better blocker of the two. So sometimes you get unlucky. And I've known for a long time, Sig, and honestly, this is the thing I struggle with the most, is figuring out really the best way to study offensive lines and understand. And there's a lot of really good experts out there. So I study it and I read what they have. But the thing I'm going to put down, and I've wrote this down in the past, but I wrote it down and I start it because I keep a notebook with me, Sig, as I go through the season. Lessons learned. I have this written down like 10 times already. Understanding offensive lines and what it does to a tight end. Because Kyle Rudolph staying into block, OJ Howard staying into block, week 1, Vance McDonald was staying into block. If you have situations like that, I think that's a big issue for tight ends. And I think it's something we should talk about more in the preseason next year.
There's probably play calling, blitzing formations that can
absolutely
cause rational coaching to say this tight end's going to stay in, our team's going to do that. The chess game. I love it, man. And you're going to be back again at least once, probably multiple times. You're in the rotation. I hope that's okay. And because I want you to get the lessons learned notebook out. We're just gonna spend the whole episode next time in the lessons learned.
Lessons learned.
Yeah, no, it's good, man, and that just really is a testament to the work you're doing and so many other people. You know, Dwain McFarland at Dwain McFarland, Matt Waldman, RSP, FF Hustle with Brian Drake. That's a great show. And Football Guys, and so many other people who are just doing tremendous work. And I know there are people that deserve to be on the couch that I'll probably just never have a chance to get to because we're only here once a week. But we're here for you every week because you're the best. Our fantasy football community, we love you. You're our lifeblood. You give us a chance to do this. We hope you let us breathe. So we help you breathe. Get the oxygen, like on the airplane. Get your oxygen first. You can't help anybody else. Without your oxygen, you give us oxygen, folks. You're so very classy. Good luck in week 3. All right, not yet. This is the extra little, I'm going to say